And that's it. We're live. Sort of. Well, it'll be live soon. Hi. Hi, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of AusTableTalk. My name is Luke, and I am at the table with Lily and Steve.
Hello.
Good evening.
Hello.
So, and our producer of the evening, who's off camera right now, Kristen. Hello, Kristen. There's her hand. Yeah, there she is. All right. So tonight we have a topic that was a request from the Table Tribe. So this was requested by James Paulette a long time ago. And James, I apologize for how long this has taken to get here. This is one of those topics that we were like, this is a great idea. We should do this. But it's one that we want to do tactfully and we want to actually, do really well. And so we kept putting it off and putting it off and putting it off. And so now we just like, now's the time. Let's do it. So we are here to talk about the faith experience of neurodivergent people. And that's a mouthful, but I think that as we go through, it doesn't really matter whether you're on the side where you have personal experience with that or you do not. I think this is going to be a useful episode because we're trying to come at this from multiple perspectives. I mean, at the table here, we'll share some of our experiences, but I've also asked people in our community to share what their faith experience has been like, if they have been neurodivergent in their experiences. So anyway, we're going to go through a few different things. We've got some recordings to share, but just to open it up, starting with you guys, like, is this something that you've thought about a lot? Is this something you have personal experience with? Like, let's just like do our disclosure. What's the story at the table?
Please.
Yeah.
I don't know. I wouldn't have said that I necessarily identify with any particular.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I don't know.
You don't have to have an answer. You don't. This is not like you have to be neurodivergent to have the conversation.
I don't think so. I don't know. And I think there can, like, for sure, people's brains operate differently. Like,
yes.
That's. I'm not debating that, but I also feel like there's boxes that society just puts people in. And it's kind of like, well, at what point are you in the box, or do you even want to be in the box? Like, I don't know.
Yeah.
So
yeah,
for me, it's a bit of a grey area. Like, obviously, people can have varying degrees as well. So whatever. But
I do think it's something that has become like, it has entered the public consciousness, right? And so I think there's a lot of. I mean, I don't know. I'm not qualified to make these statements, but I just, based on my experience, I feel like there's a lot of people who claim that they are because it's an in thing. Like, there's so many people that do. Like, I've met people like that like they think they're and I don't know. I'm not qualified to say if they are or they aren't, but I feel like it's become something that a lot of people like make reels about, and some of the reels are super uninformed. You know what I mean? Like people that like just apply the label to any kind of random thing, and I don't think that's super helpful. But I love the fact that it has become a point of discussion. Whether everyone's using it well or not, I think is kind of irrelevant. But I think it's been really helpful for a lot of people for it to become a part of the common discussion.
I definitely think if anything gets popular, it's going to have a surplus of both actually people who identify and are supported by that community, but also people who will just abuse it as a trend.
Yeah.
But like, do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, the ratio is crazy.
Yes.
And I think for the most part, it's been really positive, the amount of awareness and everything that's happened. And that with that, a lot of more education, as much as there are things that are not educational and are a little bit misleading.
Yeah.
There's more education and there's more people being
The
educated.
net effect is good.
Yeah. And like, regardless of whether you identify with the community or not, like everyone has someone in their life that's neurodivergent.
Yep.
So being able to be educated on it is so helpful. And I feel like it's empowered so many people and helped them to love themselves more and be able to function better in society. So I'm in love with it. Like, as someone who felt so crazy growing up, I think answering your first question, like, neurodivergent faith is my life. So that's the only way that I've been able to live as myself is my faith. So I really appreciate the fact that God meets us where we're at, and that He works in the grays, not the black and the white. So that's been a really big, without giving away our whole talk here. It's been a really big blessing for me, and then being able to find other Christians who also have the same thing. So I think this is a really cool panel to chat about this from our different. Just off that, I'm keen.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, from my experience with like growing up, it wasn't something that I ever really thought about much. Like I was aware of it, but like it's only really like entered common conversations in the last like 5 to 10 years kind of thing. And I never would have placed myself like or identified with that experience at all. And it really has only been like of the last couple of years that I have noticed more so that like other people, they experience life so differently to me and how they think about the world around them. And that has caused me to go, like, maybe, like you were saying, Steve, like I think everyone's brains do work a bit differently, whatever the label is that comes in there. But I've only sort of like recently realized that my brain does work differently to other people, right? And Lily was one of the first people that said like, oh, you are like so ADHD. I'm like, I've never been diagnosed. And to be honest, I'm at a place in my life where I'm like sufficiently far through that I am who I am, and like the label makes zero
There's
difference
so many more
to
priorities
me. That's right.
Like
That, you know, I've got my life trajectory. I know what I'm doing, and I know how to make my brain do what I need it to do. And so like I don't feel any benefit to getting diagnosed or whatever. But the more I learn about it, the more I'm like, yep.
But isn't that so relieving as well, learning about it? Because I feel like for me, I feel like everyone's going to have their own, what do you call it, experiences with being diagnosed and putting the box and the label on it. But for me, it was so liberating because it's like, oh, there's other people who relate.
It gives you context.
Yeah.
It's not just like, I'm not crazy.
It's not just, oh, you couldn't do this, therefore you're lazy. It's like, no, actually, there's so much more battles that you wouldn't understand because your brain doesn't work the same. For me to be able to think about the task, remember the task, and do the task, you know? So it puts me within a world where I can actually be a good person and not be lazy and not be a failure and not be certain things just because I'm not getting there on a certain time that other people would process things. And it also makes sense for not just my weaknesses, but my strengths, where I can read a room like that and I can, you know, bounce off heaps of people, multitask. Spidey sense really does be working. And like, you know, all of this stuff where my intuition is really high, my empath skills are high, that kind of stuff as well. And it puts it in a context of, okay, so this is how I can harness my weaknesses and my strengths better. So
you can structure for the things that you know that you struggle with.
It's like a little manual of how to live as Lily. And I'm like, damn, I thought I was writing this, but someone else has some notes that I can share. So it's super cool.
I think for me, one of the most useful things was when I stopped comparing myself to people that were able to like stay on task and be like, you know, like spend 10 hours, you know, being super productive and moving task to task. Like I've been a very hard worker for my whole life, but I can't do that. And I think that was the thing when I realized I actually am a very disciplined person, but I just can't do this thing.
Exactly.
Like my discipline, I can be super disciplined over here, but just on this kind of task doesn't work for me. And so I have to like work in sprints, you know, and make room for my brain to be creative in the gaps. And like I've figured out how to do that like just by trial and error. But now I'm like, oh, that of course. Right.
And like making different definitions of hardworking or whatever. That really opens it up, right? Because
that's a good point.
Because then it's not just going, oh, you can't work for 10 hours straight. You're not a hard worker. You can say that all you want, but I'm seeing you and you're working for 2 hours and then having a break and then coming back. What, you can't just sit down and focus, you know? And it's like, no, that doesn't define hardworking. Hardworking is your work ethic and your passion for it and the fact that the task gets done well. Like,
that's a good point.
Yeah, so it opens up the definition.
Now.
Do tell, Steve, because I'm confused. What do you mean?
One of the guys at work, and I think there's possibly other elements to it as well. But I look at the way they do their work, and I go, dude, finish it. But yeah, I'm like, maybe that's just not how they roll. because it's not how they roll.
Yeah.
Hey, I'm convicted in the same ways all the time, and I'm coming from a place where I should know better, So I feel like it is a fine line between like how does your brain work and what challenges do you have, but also what choices are you making and the type of person you actually want to be. So.
Yeah, and I think a part of the super, and I think this is another reason why a lot of people who are neurodivergent in some way end up being leaders, because they're not necessarily great at doing the thing, but they're really good at understanding the people who do the thing.
Oh yeah,
right?
holistic view.
So, and I think that's one of the things for me. In my business, I hire based on what my gaps are, and so I'm like, oh, I can't do this thing, and so I need to hire someone who is really good at doing that thing, and then that hole's closed, and then I can go and close another hole. And so I'm good at finding the holes, but I'm not so great at doing the things. And so, yeah, I think that's just one of those things of knowing what you do. You mentioned, the guy at work. I think people like that are not necessarily bad. They're just in the wrong seat. Like they just need to find the right seat on the bus for them. So
yeah, there's because then you open it up to like conversations about accessibility. Like I've been doing aged care course to help me do support work, and talking about how different areas and different spaces, different clubs, different activities aren't accessible to certain people, just off the assumption that they wouldn't be interested in it, they wouldn't do it, when who are you to say that, Yeah. So our whole job is to help them be able to be independent and make those decisions. And it's just made me think, how does this apply to like everything?
Yeah.
And the fact that all of us are very different people, and how fast we are to judge to be able to protect ourselves and our worldview. When in reality, there are people who exist outside of it, and being able to learn and grow. And with that PSA, I feel like all of us kind of relate on, like, I don't want to chuck you in there if you don't want to be there. But I feel like we're all agreeing on the same kind of stuff. And I'm aware that neurodivergence is a huge spectrum.
Yes.
So when we say neurodivergence, we're talking about our personal experience. I understand that other people listening might have a completely different experience, because I am talking about OCD and ADHD, whereas like there's so much other stuff.
Yeah,
so,
absolutely.
Yeah.
And that's why that's one of the reasons I didn't want to do this episode too quickly, because I recognize that there's a very, very limited perspective that we have right here. And that's why the recordings, we're going to go to the recordings in just a minute, but I think that's why they're super important, because each one, we've got 3 that we want to share, and each one of them has a fairly dramatically different experience, or category of neurodivergence.
And even if you fit into the same category, people's experiences are so different as well. So respecting your experience as well while we're talking about that.
Before we do that, there were 2 texts that I wanted to read, which I think are important for this particular discussion. One is in 2 Corinthians chapter 12 from verse 9. It says, "And he said to me, my grace is sufficient for you, for my strength is made perfect in weakness. Therefore, more gladly I will rather boast in my infirmities, that the power of Christ may rest upon me." Now, in this context, Paul is writing about his own infirmity, and he doesn't expressly say what it is, but like for a lot of scholars, they believe that this was poor eyesight. So this wasn't necessarily neurodivergence, but I think the same principles apply, that God used the areas that he was weak in order to show the strength of God. And I think for every one of us, whether you're neurotypical or neurodivergent, you have certain areas of strength and weakness, and God gave you those strengths to use for him. Absolutely. Also, he gave you those weaknesses to show his glory in. And so it doesn't really matter where you fit in the puzzle. God is going to use you for his glory.
For sure.
The other one that I thought of, and we don't necessarily need to turn there, but it's Psalm 139 verse 9, where it says that we are fearfully and wonderfully made. And whilst I don't necessarily think that all neurodivergence is a blessing, because some people really struggle with that, and we're gonna talk about that. It's not like, oh, this is a superpower and it's always awesome, right?
Unicorns, yeah.
Yeah, but so obviously this is sin came into the world, and that's why we're not perfect, right? We're not in that Edenic experience. But I think it is also equally important for us to recognize that God has been right with us at every point of that process, and he knows us inside and out, and how we can be optimized to the highest degree for living in the world of sin that we find ourselves in. So without further ado, let's have a look at our first. Sorry.
How do I do that?
If you go to Notion on there, you should be able to play the first audio track.
I'm trying to find the Notion tab.
So
Three
if you click the
fingers
Notion icon at the bottom, which is
Yeah, Macs are weird.
they're fantastic actually. Just so you know,
Yeah,
Steve.
actually, for your information.
Here we go.
I can use them. I
Oh,
just
you've gone to a
think they're
different
weird.
tab. Let me help you out.
Thank you, Luke.
Do you not have a Mac?
No, I'm normal.
They're
Normal.
they're overpriced
Yes, for good reasons.
for good reasons.
I'll play James's.
Hey, yes. So we're going to play James's first. James, I thought it fitting to have James's first. He made the suggestion for this episode, and so I asked James to send us a recording of just what his experience has looked like, particularly in regards to faith. So let's play that.
And I keep it on your cameras, hey?
Yeah.
Hi everyone, I'm James and I'm 28 years old and I have Asperger's syndrome. My journey of faith has been quite a journey with many ups and downs and moments of not quite knowing what to believe. I feel that the way that I want to naturally process things is that there has to be an order to everything and that there has to be lots of rules. And so initially my journey of faith was pretty easy, but when I found myself in a place where I wanted to break the rules for different reasons and some tendencies that I had, then that was really hard to reconcile. Some of the parts of faith life that I find that are challenging would be ones involving people, because I can sometimes be a little bit too blunt or a little bit full on. There's definitely been moments where I've questioned where my place is in amongst a neurotypical world, where I may not necessarily see eye to eye with everyone in like social circumstances. I will generally feel like everyone else has someone to talk to, and so I can then feel a little bit lonely because I don't have anyone to talk to. I don't have a whole lot of neurodivergent friends. One of the friends that I do have, his experience with neurodivergence has been a little bit different to mine. Like, some people don't like it, but I'm fairly high functioning. So I was brought up with the expectation that you just got on with life. What do I wish neurotypical people understood about my experience? I kind of wish that they'd hear they could understand some of the voices that run around in my head. And all of the feedback loops that I sometimes hear.
Awesome. Thank you.
That was so cool. I love your self-awareness. The fact that you've drawn those lines is so sick to me.
Yeah.
It's between your faith and your neurodivergence and your experience of the world. And I definitely relate with the order thing. Like, I used to have really severe OCD, and I've got it a little under wraps now, but it's still there in a way. I'm trying to learn how to use it as a strength, as we do. But yeah, that whole like thinking very mathematically of like this equals this. So if I need to twist that a little bit to my current situation, how does that work? And how does God reach me outside of the bounds of that order? Yeah. I think it's really cool knowing that, like, I believe, help my unbelief.
Yeah.
You know, like Jesus is there with us while we're figuring it out. That's the whole purpose of our faith.
Yeah.
And he sees the unseen. Like, I feel like a lot of neurodivergent people, that is our dream.
Yeah.
Our dream to be able to obviously maybe edit it a little bit, but have a way to show people, especially those who we love and want to connect with the most, the challenges that we face to get just function in everyday life. And like this to reach expectations in society with our family, with our friends, and then you add church as well, because that is another community that even if we are focusing on Jesus and he's the center and our faith is the center, we still subconsciously, even more so as neurodivergent people, want to live up to the expectations. I feel like I don't want to speak for everyone,
Yeah.
but I can definitely see the challenge there, and I think it's so sick that Jesus already sees the unseen.
Yeah.
He already gets it. That is the most liberating for me with that.
When I was listening to that, I thought it was really interesting when James, when you were saying about the words that are escaping me now, but like there was a couple of things anyway. One was when you were talking about the rules and the black and white. I think as Christians that I can't relate to the way you view the world, because I see the world in a very fluid way. It's not very black and white for me. I'm comfortable there, but there's a temptation when I talk to people who I think have pretty good theology. When they see people who experience the world in this very black and white, I like rules kind of way.
Legalism.
That's right. It's like, oh, that's legalism, and that's a bad thing. That's what Jesus was against, right? And so I feel like people are really quick to do that. But I think what this shows is just how beautiful how God actually relates to us is, because for somebody who is neurodivergent and appreciates the rules and the order and the structure that they bring into the Christian experience, God is meeting them right there. Like they are using those laws in the way that God intended them to be used. I think in a lot of cases,
it expresses differently through different people. Right?
That's right. That's right. And it's so easy just to say, oh well, everyone's Christian experience and their Christian walk, they should look like mine.
Yeah. Well, legalism's only legalism when you're keeping the law to save yourself.
Yes.
So if you're keeping the law because God's asked us to,
it's a different
more
thing.
power to you. Right.
I love that. That's cool.
Yeah.
There's nothing wrong with it. And it might appear on the outside, but that's not.
That's not the point.
Who
though.
cares about the outside?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. God judges the heart.
Yeah. And this is where judgment comes in. Like I think, can we judge people that are doing hurtful things? 100% yes, because we can see those things and we can see the
There's
motivations.
a line.
There's a line, right? But as far as the different experiences, like this person is relating to God in this black and white kind of way. This person is in a more fluid way. They're both at different places in their experience. I think the real Christian maturity is both of those people looking at each other and saying, oh,
I can learn from you.
I can learn from you, or and Jesus is just as much your friend as he is my friend.
Yes.
I think that's where the beauty happens, just allowing that to be what it is.
And also, God understands your need for neurodivergent community within faith.
Yeah.
And I say that from experience because I grew up with not many people understanding that very much. And it was only until like I was a little older, maybe like 15, 16, I started finding people who I was like, I wonder why I'm clicking with these people way more than everyone else.
Yeah.
And then later on I found out. But God really does understand our need for finding our people. And he will find those people for us in the right time.
Yeah.
So I wouldn't stress too much because I know God does see all of the unseen, and like if you've got a good desire in your heart, it will come to pass. So yeah.
And I know it might be difficult, and I mean this is easy for me to say, not knowing your life, James, and actually being there physically with you and seeing your community, and I don't know what that looks like. But I look at my own church community and I think about the people that don't fit in the typical boxes, and some of them struggle much more than others, yes, but I think the whole community benefits from having those people in it, because when everybody is consistent, like everyone looks the same, thinks the same, acts the same, nobody actually has to learn how to manage community and love people unconditionally and relate to other people that have different mindsets.
There's no growth.
That's right. And so whilst I wish that you had more community around you and that you felt more seen by them, at the same time, I think you would be bringing those blessings to the community that you are in,
sure.
even if you're not necessarily seeing it or feeling appreciated for those blessings that you're bringing at this point.
Sure.
Just before we go to the next one, I thought it would be, I wanted to point out as well, he mentioned that he's high functioning. I actually think that people who are neurodivergent in whatever category they're in, but high functioning, I almost think that puts a really big burden on them.
Oh yeah.
Right? Because it's not like people can't just look at it and go, oh, it's like when you got a broken leg and you got a cast on. People see that and they're like, oh, you can't walk. Okay, cool. Like, I get it. But if you've got something wrong with you that's not visible and people can't readily understand,
Unseen becomes buried.
yeah, that's right. And the expectations remain the same, right?
Yep.
People still expect you to function, think,
Yeah.
relate, communicate in the same ways that everybody else does.
Yeah.
I mean, Sarah, like her energy levels, she's got, some health challenges, and like her energy levels are really, really low. And so people will say, oh, well, why don't you just go for a walk? Or like,
Oh.
and it's kind of like, do you understand? Like, that's actually not possible. Like, it's not that it's hard; it's that it's not possible. There's a difference,
Yeah.
And some people just don't refuse to see that as an option, right? And I think it's the same for people that are high functioning in one way. So people see that and go, "Oh, this person's totally cool," but it's actually a lot harder for them just to be what they need to be.
I always think of it like this. I don't want to offend anyone, but I think all of us can, like, no matter who you are, can relate to someone talking to you and asking a really confronting question or whatever, and you're going, oh, you just haven't gotten to the level of growth that I have in that area. And I'm not going to shove it in your face, but I can see that, and I'm noticing that so that I don't have to take the guilt of whatever you've just put on me. Like, I always think of it as, our kids will just say whatever.
Yeah.
And they'll come up to you and be like, why are you doing that? My dad said that's not a good thing to do. You can go to hell for that. Like they'll just say the most out, and you're like, okay, kid, and it's not like that's an extreme level, obviously, because you're dealing with little humans who are learning about the world for the first time. But in a real way, we are all learning for the first time.
Yes.
And if we can have some grace where other people are not, but also not put that on ourselves, that judgment on ourselves, I feel like there would be way more, oh, you're on that side and I'm on this side and I learn from you.
Yeah.
And we could love each other regardless, because we're all on the same journey. We're all equal, but we're also weaknesses and strengths in different areas.
Yeah.
And it's a beautiful thing.
Yeah.
It really is. Yeah.
And I think for, what is it? Atypical? I don't know.
Neurotypical.
Neurotypical, that's the one.
Yeah.
For, like, just to speak to that for a minute, Mike, I remember in primary school there was a boy in my grade who, I don't know, he was neurodivergent. I don't know what it was, but he had something, and I was like the only kid in the whole grade that would even talk to him. So like we always got partnered up like for everything, and it's tiring. Like it is hard work, but if you have a good community, then like that's what it's all about. Like these people shouldn't be, left on the edges. Like your friends, like the church community shouldn't be like, oh, they're different. It's like, oh no,
That's a blessing. Like,
we all just, if everyone gets in and like hangs out, it's great. And like you said, it benefits the group because then you get another perspective. And like I've been thinking like a few times with what you guys have been saying, that no one thinks the same, even though we throw around like atypical, whatever it is, neurotypical. Like
no one actually is that typical.
It doesn't mean anything. Like
Normal does not exist.
Like and the whole human experience is just being comfortable in yourself and willing to listen to someone else, and then just listening.
I love that. So cool.
Yeah,
To everyone, like it doesn't have to. Like,
that's a soundbite.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Let's have our next clip. This is Kirsten. I actually grew up with Kirsten, and she was one of the people on my shortlist that I thought would be interesting to bring a mother's perspective, because this is like how neurodivergent in that intersection with faith, and I thought, it'd be so interesting to hear how she thinks of that as a parent. And so anyway, let's play that one.
Good morning, everybody. Thank you so much for having me on this segment. My name's Kirsten, and I am here to give a parent's point of view. So my daughter Shiloh is, she was diagnosed with a neurological disease called opsoclonus myoclonus ataxia syndrome when she was 2 years old, and then when she was about 3.5, she was diagnosed with autism secondary to that. So she's currently 6, about to turn 7, and it has been a very interesting couple of years with her. So I'm Seventh-day Adventist. I grew up in church. Church was a huge part of my life. And as I got older, I started working. I became a nurse, and I never lost my faith, but I don't go to church as often as I'd like to. And I guess for me personally, having that relationship with God was the one thing that got me through the diagnosis, the treatment, all of those things when Shiloh was younger. And quite often, on the days that I found the hardest, I would really lean heavily on God. And the one thing that always plays in my mind, and still does, is how do people who don't have faith and don't believe in God and have any sort of relationship with Him, how do they get through these things? Because it's hard, and personally, when I was going, when Shiloh was diagnosed and we were going through the time that she was very unwell, she was, I think, the 6th in Australia to be diagnosed. So, the support network wasn't, for that particular illness, just sort of didn't exist. I reached out to people in America and all over the world who are parents or children who'd been through this, but personally and in my everyday life, I had nobody. I felt like it was me on my own, and I had to be strong. I had to find a way to be strong for my children. And so, that was the one thing, where would I be without God? I don't know if I would have been able to do it. And I know, so fast forward to a year or two ago, so as I said, I went to church every day, and church was a huge part, and that church family was a huge part of my life when I was growing up. And Shiloh wasn't well enough as a child to go to church. And I thought, I'd love to get her used to church and, get her accustomed, introduce her to that church environment, the church family, and, sort of start to build the foundations of having a relationship with God. And I mean, at home, I read bedtime stories, Christian stories to her. My kids know the Bible, although they've not been to church. And anyway, I took the kids to church, and it was one of Shiloh's worst experiences. She couldn't handle all the people, and they were all, different faces. And, at church, everyone comes up, they stand at the door, they come up to greet you. And for her, it was just so incredibly overwhelming. And then having to sit still in a pew, surrounded by people that she didn't know, although they weren't strangers, they're people that I grew up with. She struggled. And then as well, the singing, like song service, and the singing and the loud sounds and the music, it was just, we had to take her out and walk around the car park with her, because it was just the whole experience was overstimulating for her. She wasn't able to go to Sabbath school because she saw all the other children and just went, I can't do this. So I found that church wasn't something that she could manage and I guess cope with, and it became a stressful environment for her where, I remember when I was a child, I looked forward to going to church, going to Sabbath school, and meeting all my friends. I grew up with Luke, and we used to go to church together, and I was a little bit sad for my daughter, because I understood then that she'd never had that experience that I did of church. But at the same time, it didn't mean that she wasn't able to foster a relationship or develop a relationship with God. It just meant the approach would be different, So, and now that she's a bit older, she's able to say, yes, I want to do that. No, I don't like that. And she remembers church. And the one thing she says to me is, Mummy, don't take me back there, please. I don't want to go there. You know, so I guess I was so excited to introduce her to this beautiful part of life. And for her, it was just, you know, I had to understand and accept that it's something that she may never be okay with, you know. But we acknowledge, worship and praise God in many other ways. And as I said, music for me has always been a huge part of my life. And I have passed that on to the kids as well. So, you know, Shiloh could hardly talk when she was younger, but the first song she learned to sing was Jesus Loves Me. You know, so it's been a humbling experience. But I guess ultimately, I can't comprehend how anyone gets through life, even just the day to day without God, but being part of, being a parent of a child with neurodiversity, it's just, I couldn't do it. I just couldn't do it. So, yeah, as I said, I'm really interested to hear everyone else's points of view, and again, thank you for inviting me onto the segment.
Thanks, Kirsten. A couple of things really stood out to me there, because like the first thing that she was saying about how can people get by without God in those circumstances. I think it's really impressive. I mean, I've known Kirsten for a very long time, and I think we met I think there's a photo of us together in like 1994, so it's been a minute. And but knowing like some more of the backstory than what she shared there, like she is an incredibly strong person. Like, just what she's been able to get through, and even with whatever's gone on, you can talk to her, and it's like, "How are you doing?" She's got, "Oh, I'm so grateful. This happened. This is really cool this week." And she doesn't focus on any of the bad stuff. She just tells you all the things that she's like massively grateful for, and like that's just how she is, Yeah. And I just think that is beautiful, the way that she does that. But it could have so easily been like, I've seen so many other people, right? They get this adversity in their life, they go the opposite direction, and they're like, how could you believe in God? And they reject God on the basis of the adversity, whereas she sees it in the inverse of that. And I think that's a really beautiful like perspective to have, because a lot of people reject their faith for the same reasons.
This one hits home for me.
Yeah.
As a troublemaking neurodivergent child, my mom could, like, I'm going to make her listen to this episode because that experience, obviously, completely different neurodivergent experience as Shiloh, but your experience with praying and needing that prayer to understand and to communicate and to best empower your kid and get through on the days that she wasn't able to be maybe a bit more tactful towards you, or be a part of that. Like, discipline's different, and talking about stuff as you grow up is different, and you've got to it sounds like even on a even higher scale, like 6 diagnosed in the country is insane. The amount of trailblazing that you've done with God.
Yeah.
You are so cool. I've never met you, but I have so much respect for you. And I think, like, my mum definitely relates to that. And for us, like, now I'm turning 22 this year. I can seriously say that I thank my mum for a lot of the reason why I am here today, for the reason that I am the person that I am, and for the ways that she's prayed through my neurodivergent experience of the world, in feeling like an outsider and feeling misunderstood, not being able to communicate at times, and her having to see me enough to communicate for me. I know what Shiloh said was 6 or 7, and she's got, you guys are going to have a blast. I can just say that. Like, me and my mum, we've gone through a lot, and yeah, it wasn't all fun, but I've never been. She's my best friend, and I'm not gonna write your story for you, but I'm just saying God's good, and yeah, the sacrifices that you make for yourself, for your kid. She might not be able to communicate it, but it means a lot to her, I bet. The strong person that you are. And as far as I also want to comment on you talking about not going to church, at different times we couldn't do that either. My mum also is neurodivergent, but she didn't have the same support that she's given me. My mum's ADHD as well. Ew. So yeah, just going to church, I reckon, is secondary to your walk with Jesus. People live outside. People don't even know what church really is, and they are shining Jesus so strongly. I just came back from Converge, which is a SEA youth thing down in northern New South, and it covers like all of
Whole country, right?
Yeah, whole of Australia. Yeah. Lots of awesome mission-minded young people, and the speaker there was saying that you can be in church and your eyes can be on Babylon, and there are people in Babylon that their eyes are on Christ.
Yep.
And church is no indicator of how saved you are, of how close you are to Jesus, of anything like that. So you existing outside that expectation makes me respect you more because the neurodivergent experience of church, and like when you take church judgment, the music, the sitting still, it takes it to a different level of like, this is us also finding our own challenges to be able to be a part of that and be true to our faith. So I think you don't, there's been many ways that me and my mum have found to modify our church experience so that we can still experience that awesomeness that you did in your childhood, that you want your kid to experience. There is way more than just sitting in church. Like there's prayer groups and there's, living life together as when you start to find people who relate to you on that level of, oh, you're a neurodivergent, parent of, and we can relate on a level and our kids can relate on a level. And I'm just going to pray for you guys to find your people within your faith community, because for me, that was the coolest experience. And I think, it's going to be awesome. So I'm keen.
Thanks for sharing, Lil. I was really thinking about this point of like, what do you do when the church community is the problem? Yeah. And like, not that it's a bad church community, but just when a person is in like such a place where it's not helpful to them, would God want them to be there? Like, I mean, does God want us to have positive like communities of faith around us? 100%. Did he say it has to be at a church with 200 people?
The one right in your face?
Yeah. Like, and sitting in pews all facing the front. Like, he didn't say any of that, right?
Yeah.
Like, I feel like, and I'm not saying this is what you need to do. I'm not like, this is not me prescribing anything, but what I'm meaning is like, for people where that is a no-go and it's just not happening at all, you could have a situation like we do here every Thursday night where there's like a few people getting together, having a meal together and talking about Jesus.
Yeah.
And that can be just as spiritually uplifting, right?
Yeah.
And I know for me, I love church. I am the biggest extrovert in this room. Yes, I am the biggest extrovert in this room. And in most rooms, accurate. But like, I get to church and I am just supercharged. I think this is great. But where do I get the majority of my spiritual nurturing and growth? I get it here with this format. This is where I grow the most. And so I think we do ourselves a disservice, and we do our brothers and sisters a disservice when we think that only in like this particular format of church can you meet Jesus.
Exactly. The definitions of the world and of Christianity and of religion, we can bend it because Jesus exists outside of it.
Yeah.
And he reaches us outside of it, and we are already experiencing him outside of it. So he can help us find what we need. The church is made up and the world is made up of imperfect people. So with all the love in the world, because I respect each and every single person's journey, but sometimes that church environment isn't the environment. maybe it's a different one, maybe it's at home, maybe, you know, and I feel like there's been so many times where me and my mum trying out different stuff and then hitting a wall, hitting a wall and hitting a wall. Just don't give up because it's
keep
worth
trying.
it. It's worth it. And the times that you hit a wall grows both of you. And by the time you get to where you wanted to go, you realize that God was setting you up the entire time.
Yeah.
The entire time. And he does exist out of all of those bounds. So just because an imperfect person is up there saying something that you might not relate to or excludes you from that group doesn't mean that Jesus doesn't love them and you just as much. So
just before we go to our final one, I think a theme that I'm noticing from James's and also Kirsten's is that feeling of disconnection and loneliness. Neither of them want the loneliness, right? And I think it's helpful for us to see that. And if anybody out there feels like, oh, I can't relate, like I feel connected, well, then that's great, because you're one of the people who can fix this problem, right? You know, to connect with these people and don't give up on them. Because I mean, people who are involved in churches, it is so easy to be blind to the people who don't show up, you know, because you're there and everyone else that's there you see, but you know, do you remember that person who is kind of on the fringes, doesn't really get along that well with people, and you know they haven't been there for 3 weeks? Do you know they haven't been there for those 3 weeks? You know, like,
and not in I need to do this because it's a good
no,
thing to do.
not at all.
You can tell, you know, everyone can tell when someone's genuine or not.
Yeah.
Just how
Just be
cool
real.
is it to be the only person who knows that person?
Yeah.
Just think about how cool that is.
Yeah.
That is a whole unique package of a human that God's created beautifully. And everyone else is neglecting the fact that could be an insanely funny, awesome, insane stories, insane perspectives on life person. And the fact that you've gone out of your comfort zone to go reach them, that's awesome.
It ends up being a blessing to you, even if you were intending to bless them, right? Yeah. Cool. Well, the last one is Steve. This is actually a video, so you've got a face to put to the voice on this one. Steve and I grew up together. Steve is also Lily's uncle, so there's a lot of connections going around for this particular contribution. But Steve, when I was originally planning for this episode, I posted on our Instagram feed and just said on Instagram story and said, hey, does anyone want to share their experience for this? And Steve was like, oh, if you ever need anything, like, let me know. And just because I know Steve so well, I said, let's have a call. So we hopped on a call, and this call is from last year sometime. So this wasn't recorded in the last week or so. So I'm just setting that for context. So if anyone who knows Steve listens to it and is like, really? Is that like that recent? No. This is a conversation that has been in the bag for a while. It's just that we didn't get the opportunity to do this. So I will also say this is out of like a 30-minute conversation. To make it more digestible for the sake of this episode, I've cut that really heavily, so it's like 9 minutes. So it's a bit choppy in places because I've cut out a bunch of stuff just to get down to the things that is really specifically relevant to this particular topic. What I will do, though, is I'm going to post the interview with Steve in its entirety as a bonus episode. So if you want to hear more of Steve's story, and trust me, there's a lot more context to it that you're not going to hear in this clip. But if you want to hear that, definitely go and have a look at the audio podcast, because I'll release the full version of it over there as a bonus after this one comes out. So thank you. Just pull it up onto the... Oh, no. If you go, I've already got like a exported version of it, which...
Help. Help.
I know. Who'd use them?
Can I just say, did you see how quickly and
Yeah,
elegantly I did
exactly.
what I needed to do just then?
0.2 seconds. I'm just saying.
That's it. Steve is just grinding over there like, what?
That's no faster than I could have done. Alt-tab.
I know, but that's not effective with that many with the number of windows I have right now. I'd have to be alt-tabbing for a week and a half.
Every time I switch jobs, I close everything down and then reopen the stuff I need, so I don't have.
You could never.
No, I could not.
You could never.
I wish I could actually
you
count how
seen
many
it?
tabs I have right now
oh
for
my
you.
gosh.
Yeah, that's why I need so much RAM. 'cause
Yeah. Okay, this is not a therapy session for my computer usage habits, so let's just watch the video.
Confession time.
Can you just start by explaining your relationship to the topic and where you fit on the experience?
So I have bipolar 1. Really recently diagnosed. After digging deeper, it's something that I've actually had my whole life. It just got out of hand last year, which led to hospitalization and medication, and a very long healing process. But yeah, so I've had a lot of mood swings and some pretty full-on stuff from time to time growing up. But the biggest one I had was last year, and that was a manic episode where they also believe there was some psychosis as well.
When was that the first time that you suspected that this may be the situation, or have you sort of always had it in the back of your mind, or?
I've always had some in the back of my mind something was wrong, but I always kind of believed that like mental health was for like weak people. You know,
Weak people.
I didn't believe in depression. I didn't believe in all that stuff, which is really surprising because when I think back, like there was times where like in my teens I couldn't leave the house because I thought someone was going to kill me. You know, and that lasted months. There was times where I've seen people walking through my house that weren't there, and you know, yes, like
if you weren't thinking of mental health care as being like a real thing, how did you cope with those episodes throughout your early life?
a lot of self-medication. Yeah, when I obviously in my teens, drugs, alcohol, and then like that period when I was in church, I was raging a lot. I couldn't really understand why I was like that and what was wrong with me. And then I'd have long, like low periods as well.
Looking back, can you see, specifically talking about your journey of faith, were there anything specific that you could see how it changed that experience compared to the people that were around you?
The professionals always want to like put everything on bipolar, but so it's hard to tell what's bipolar and what's normal. I don't know, human being behavior, whatever that is. Like after my daughter was born and I was in church for quite a while, and you know I was very like gung-ho ministry, and then just like that I dropped out of church and just never went back. And it was just like something that kind of like I just started getting this feeling of like, I don't know, I was just like losing it or drifting away, and then one day I just was like, nah, that's it. And I just went from all the way that way to all the way the other way, and I was always just very extreme with everything when I take it on. You know, that could also be like sometimes with mania you get very spiritual. And yeah, when I was like having psychosis last year, I was spiritual. Very spiritual. Yeah.
How are you managing it now? You know, you said you're seeing a psychologist. How do these things affect how you're living now? Has it evened things out? Is it still hard but just easy now? You understand it better, or?
Man, it's been a pretty rough ride since my diagnosis. I probably the last month or two, I'm stable at the moment. So I just got to do everything possible to keep it that way. So yeah, meds, stick with the psychologist, and just checkups as required, and just staying close with God. That's something that I've found really struggling with this condition. Yeah, like a real battle.
Is that because when you're supercharged, then like everything's great and you sort of feel like you don't need him, or is it more because of when the depression hits, it just you feel separated, or is it both?
Right. Because you got both aspects coming.
So when you're in that manic or hypermanic state, how do you feel your relationship is with God? Do you feel like you're like super close with him, or is it just not factored in at that point because you're like got a million things in your brain going 100 kilometers an hour?
I haven't found a way to properly stay connected with God, if I'm going to be honest, in those episodes. Maybe hypomania, yeah, because you're still functioning. Mania is a different story. Like, but I'll still, like, you know, like when I was manic last year, I was like, every time that like I would have these big like surges of energy and euphoria come over me, I believed it was God healing me from all my, you know, like healing me from my stuff. And so I would start messaging like people saying, God has healed me, but Satan's trying to unheal me, and, you know, all that kind of stuff. And so like you're spiritual, but not spiritually connected. Because you're not of sound mind. So God can still reach you in those moments. I think he still keeps you safe, because the thing about mania too is like, yeah, you're high and everything, but it turns very dangerous very quick, which is like risky behaviors. Like I wrecked my car during that time because I was going down 60 kilometers roads at like 110 Ks.
Man,
I was like jumping off stairs head first into metal cages.
now you're in a more stable place. How do you relate to God in light of it? Like, is there, like, I just can't imagine that it's easy in the sense that I'm sure you've got unanswered questions that you just really wish that God would turn the lights on for, you know?
Yeah, and that's the thing. Like, if I'm being honest, like, this has hit my relationship with God big time. Before I went manic, I just started getting more involved at church and really gave my life back to God, and was preaching and was running these praise services and stuff like that. And then it came along. I will say though, like, God saved me from my depression. Like when I was in that bad depression last year, what got me out was prayer.
Yeah, wow. That lack of consistency in how you feel, just knowing whether you're going to be this headspace, or this headspace on any given day. Like, do you like try to plan ahead for that, or do you like limit the amount of things you commit to like avoid overload? Like, are there any like those sort of management things that you do?
Yeah, I pulled out of a lot of church roles, but I don't know if that's a good thing or not. I'm still, even though I said I pulled out a lot, I'm still involved in a lot. You can never really get away from church roles. Yeah, there's avoiding it, but lately I've just been like, since this has come along, I've just allowed it to control, like it's literally controlled every part of my life non-stop ever since.
Neurotypical people out there, what do you wish they understood about bipolar, or the experience of someone who does have bipolar, that they obviously don't understand?
It's not an emotion or a mood swing, really. It's actually a mood state. It's like your whole state of mood changes to an extreme and for a long period of time. But yeah, I'd say, like, what's more important than that, of what you want them to understand, is I think people just need to shut up and just listen. Most bipolar people, they want someone that will listen to what they're saying or how they're feeling, without answers, without solutions. They actually just want you to, because they don't need solutions, because there's no real cause to their issues. It's just all up here. So they just want someone to listen.
That's it. I think that's it. That's actually just paused. It's not just me sitting there. I don't normally keep that look on my face for that long. Trust me, no one wants to see it. Okay, change it, Kristen. Change it, Kristen. Thank you.
He's getting
Any minute
self-conscious.
now.
Yeah, so all of a sudden I realized that, like, I don't know how many people are going to watch this video, but I just realized there's however many there are, they're all just watching my face, like just examining every little bit.
Whoa.
Yeah. Appropriate statement. You inhaled. I was just like,
Yeah.
were you gonna say something, or you were
Oh,
just inhaling?
I can't imagine.
Yeah.
Like, I feel like we can't trust ourselves when we are thinking straight.
Mm.
I can't imagine knowing that I can't trust myself.
Mm.
Like that's man, that's heavy.
Yeah, it is. I think I thought it was right there at the end. One of the things he wishes that neurotypical people would do would just listen.
Yeah.
Shut up and listen.
Yeah.
That is easier said than done. There's a couple of friends that I have that definitely fall into this category. The one I'm thinking of, I'm not sure if they are bipolar or not. I don't know if they've been diagnosed or whatever, but it sounds very similar. I'll put it that way to what Steve is sharing. And, sometimes I've had conversations with them that are definitely far, far removed from reality. And I have, in some of those situations, I have tried to reason with them and give answers and try to be helpful. And sometimes, it's never worked, right? It's never actually helped. And so now I try to be really disciplined about not doing that and just listening. And if they ask me something, okay, I've got a green light then. Okay, that's fine. I can help. But unless I have that, it's really not helpful. And if anything, it just makes them more desperate,
Learning how to love people with neurodivergence is a thing of its own. And because you're coming from a place of love.
Yeah.
But it doesn't, it just doesn't.
That's not how it comes across.
Yeah. This one, I let you guys speak first because that's my uncle and this is
I understand.
home.
Yeah, I understand. I didn't know you were going to be on this episode,
No,
but we
I'm
planned
really
to do
glad.
this one. So, yeah.
I'm really glad.
It happened that way.
I was smiling the whole time watching that because he just before I left, he did at Eden's Landing. He did a sermon on it.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh, nice.
And so he would speak and then do a song because he's mad musical.
Yeah, he is such an awesome musician.
Oh yeah, and it's been such a, I think, relieving. He said it, himself. Music is such a channel to express yourself, and when you're someone who's unheard and unseen in those challenges, being able to do that is something he's always shared. And me growing up, I wanted to be him. I want to play the guitar like that and minister like that. And I know I'm not allowed to say this. I love you. I'm talking to all my family, but Uncle Steve is my favorite uncle. Just for the record. Totally see that hit you. But no,
That's cool.
I've got
That's
too
awesome.
much respect for the journey that he's had and the way that he's loved. And his response to that will be, I'm not perfect. Which I know. But I think, just the way that he's been able to experience that, but also not give up. I know so many times he wanted to, but and then just seeing that video and then that being a year from his talk. His talk was so, everyone was crying with him. We were all just sitting there. It was so beautiful. It was so beautiful. It wasn't just a sermon. It wasn't just him shining Jesus. It was also a huge moment of vulnerability. And it reached so many people. And it wasn't a lecture. He was connecting and going, right? You know what I mean? Yeah, because he can do that. He can feel a room and he can be a part of it. And it's reached so many people, including myself, over my lifetime. His faith has reached me so many times. And I think he was just saying in that video that he got out of a lot of church stuff. And he actually mentioned that in his talk and how he did that originally because he was trying to hide his mess
Mm-hmm.
until he could get good. And then he realized that Jesus is a part of the mess.
Mm.
Life is messy. And the biggest thing and like the biggest tool that we can have in ministry is our mess.
Yeah.
And the way that Jesus shines through it.
Mm-hmm.
My grace is sufficient, you know?
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
through our weakness, his strength shines through. And this is on some other level, but I love how Eden's crew, they, a big point that he made in his talk, my memory's horrible, but I just remember certain key things are coming up, was his community and how much they had his back. Randomly, they would call him at just the right time, you know? Just listening to God's voice and like what you're talking about, loving people with neurodivergence, loving people with bipolar specifically, and they're needing certain things. And it's hard to know because we can't relate, right?
Yeah.
So if I can't relate, how do I know unless I ask? And even that conversation can be difficult to have, and you've got to have the patience and the long, you know, unconditionalness of Jesus to be able to do that.
Yeah.
So, just seeing his brothers at Eden's, all my uncles there, and the vulnerable, the kind of unconditional love that they have as men, as dads, as Islander guys in church is like insanely world changing. And I'm going to use this as a little tiny tangent. Last year at Converge, there was, no, this was at Big Camp. Anyway, very cool pastor. I forget who he is, but this is a point that he made about we need therapy as well. Like Jesus is for the heart stuff. He's for the demons, and therapy is for the mental, because it's a resource. So use the resource. And him being a Samoan dad who's a pastor, standing on a stage and saying that to, I feel like what he was talking about, mental health is a weakness, right? That's how we grow up.
Something that weak people like blame it on, sort of thing.
We
like
all grow up with that, right? We all grow up with that. Whether we're a part of the neurodivergence and the mental health or not, we grow up with that stigma. And the fact that he stood up there, it healed so many people. Same way, like I'm just thinking now with all of those stories and how my uncle is and the way that he shines Jesus and he's feeling imperfect in his faith. That is the biggest tool that he's ever had. And it's so beautiful to me. And I know it's hard for him, but it's so beautiful to me. And the way that like our family are there and he's got his crew. And so if we stick together, we know we'll make it. Makes me think of the early church and the way that church makes us feel like we need to be perfect. Neurodivergent people have a way of standing perfectly within those lines of they could be perfect just in a different way. Or they could be completely messed up and perfect in Christ. You know? So I think it's really beautiful that the edge that we have in our different perspective of the world and our different experiences to bring a whole new crew of people to Christ. Like we are an asset for real in those hard times and in those episodes of whatever it may be that you're struggling with. Because I know I've got depressive episodes too. It really is, our story is written and we're covered. The victory's already won. And Jesus is just putting the people that we need in our path, putting the right voices into our life to help direct us in a world that we feel like isn't written for us. But he's written the story, so we're covered. And other people watching our experience and watching us grow in Christ in such a real, transformative way, you're already reaching people for Christ. So if we ever feel outside of the community, we're living Jesus, I think, more real than a lot of people because we have to.
I was having a conversation. It was one of two people, and so I'm gonna cite both of them just in case I'm wrong which one it was. But Justin Koo and Caleb Isley, I had conversations with them both in a very short time span, and so that's why it's not clear to me which one of them said this. But the quote itself stuck in my mind really strongly, and that is, "Listening is redemptive by nature." and that always sort of like settled in my brain because just what Steve was saying about just being heard and having that community around him. Because you see, I was thinking about James's experience talking about being lonely, Kirsten's experience saying being lonely, Steve, different brand of neurodivergence, right? Bipolar has like a lot of different pieces to that puzzle, but Steve is magnetic. It doesn't matter what frame of life that Steve was in, whether it was when he was in the church or when he was out of the church. He was charismatic. He was a trendsetter. I marvel. Like, I got to say, there were a number of times, okay, when he was a teenager, and I would watch him do stuff that was just, Steve, I love you, man, but it just looks so dumb. And I'm like, why are you doing that? And then I'd see all these friends hanging around, all doing the same thing, and they did it because Steve did it.
Yep.
It had nothing to do with anything like functionally intelligent. It was just, oh, well, Steve wears his shirt that way, or Steve does his hair like that, so it's cool. So we all do what Steve does, And I say that with a bit of a smirk, yes, that's funny. But Steve had he had those people around him, but that in and of itself was a really beautiful part of his healing, right? Like you were saying, having those people around him was a real blessing to him. And I think that is a great example of what a church community or a Christian community should be like. And I think that, Steve was blessed to have those people around him that helped in that scenario. But I think we can all be those people. And so the message is not we should all be like Steve, so we're attracting people. Yeah, of course, a friend must show himself friendly, right? Yes, absolutely. But in a very real and legitimate way, we all have a choice whether we're going to be those kind of people
100%.
for the people that are around us. And I, for me anyway, out of all of this conversation, we've talked about a lot of different things, but I think that's one of the big takeaways for the people that aren't necessarily a part of the neurodivergent community, right? Yeah. Listen. Be that friend and form the community that God intended us to form. Yeah.
With making church, like the more that you see different groups, it could be minorities in like racial exclusion. It could be a gender. It could be a way your brain works. There's many different ways that lines are drawn and we protect ourselves and judge first and stuff. In making church and faith accessible, I feel like we grow so much because in a small way we go, oh, okay, so neurodivergence has a feeling of being detached, and the way that we can do that is by listening. And then we go, oh, we could have lived a happier life already if we just listened. And that applies to everyone, even neurotypical people. Yeah. So I think in a way, a lot of times, this goes from like school systems to government systems to just everyday society. Whenever there's someone who steps outside of the normal protocol, it's annoying because now we have to adjust the protocol. But in reality, if you're adjusting that protocol, you are helping so many people. We're meant to grow. We're meant to change and, be our scope of the world is meant to grow. So in that way, I don't really regret things anymore. I stay accountable for it and I move on because my past self is a sum of who I am now. God was leading that girl and he's leading me now. And as we grow to be more Christ-like, because that's what it is, making faith accessible is just being Christ-like. Yeah. That's what he did. It in the ways that we might be annoyed, oh, this person can't deal with the music being that loud, now we have to turn it down, or like that person doesn't like only likes hymns, and so now we've got to, I don't know, like now we've got to move to this person, oh this person can't I can't even think anymore, but you know what I'm talking about.
Yeah, we get the point.
There are so many different people in church. There's so many different people. The more that we go, oh, like even on an individual level, Uncle Luke doesn't like loud sounds. I don't think that's true, but it's true for me. So maybe don't start smashing the table whenever something's funny around you. Do you know what I mean? Yep. Like those little things that we can find annoying about each other, the more that we move and merge and mold to each other, to accept each other as a part of our life and a part of the way that we do things, people can call it progressive. I think it's just Christ-like. And I think it's super cool. And there's only endless like, yeah, we're going to make mistakes while doing it, but that's the cool thing about it, is that we get to do it together and be fully blessed together. Yeah.
I think as you were talking, I was just thinking about the things that connect us. I mean, we've talked a lot about like the unique things for people in different categories, but I've been thinking about the things that unite us. And the verse came to mind from Romans chapter 12. I beseech you, therefore, brethren, by the mercies of God, that you present your bodies a living sacrifice, holy, acceptable to God, which is your reasonable service. And do not be conformed to this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind, that you may prove what is that good and acceptable and perfect will of God. I was thinking about that passage. In this context, I think it's really meaningful because it's going to look different for me as it's going to look for you, as it's going to look for you, as it's going to look for anybody else. But that renewing of our mind, that process needs to happen for all of us, neurotypical, neurodivergent, whatever it might be. And, every person has to get over different hurdles in order to get to the place where that can happen. And I think if we recognize that, that saying is, at the foot of the ground's level at the foot of the cross, or however that saying goes, right? That it's whenever we approach Christ, we're all on the same value placement. None of us are more important than anybody else. We all have fallen short. We all need Jesus, and that should bind us together in that community. And I think what I'm hoping this conversation has done is for people who perhaps haven't had a window into the experiences of the people who don't look and think like them. I'm hoping that this conversation has opened eyes. And I think even people who are neurodivergent, right, we've had a few different categories of that. And so, we can all broaden our experience. But I hope that this has inspired each of you to listen.
Yeah.
Communicate.
Listen, learn about each other.
Yeah.
So that we can all grow together.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Did you guys have anything final that you want to say before we wrap this one up?
No, the only thing, I wrote it down at the beginning before we started, was just that it doesn't matter how our brains think. Jesus calls us to relationship.
Yeah.
And I think so long as we have that, that's like...
That's the point.
It doesn't matter.
Yeah, that's it. Well, anyway, this has been a special episode, and we will be back next week with back to our more regular kind of shows. But thank you so much for joining us for this one. We hope you've enjoyed it. If you have, please share it with a friend, especially if you've watched this and it made you think of your friend, uncle, cousin, sister, whatever. Send it to them, share it as well. And also, please hop on the social media. Let us know. We'd love to hear what you thought of this episode. Would you like to hear more of this kind of content? We take suggestions. One thing I will say, in our regular episodes, we normally have a Tales from the Tribe section where we hear from you guys, what you're doing in ministry, or what God's leading you to, and what we really want, like the big thing, our objective as a ministry. We want to see more groups like this one springing up. I don't mean having podcasts, but I mean you having a spiritual community of people that come to your place, or you hang out together and talk about the Lord and grow together in faith. If you're doing that and you're a part of the Table Tribe, you're a part of our community, please send us a voice memo or a selfie video or something, and just tell us what your experience is like. Tell us what you guys are doing. We would love to be able to share that in that segment of our regular episodes. So anyway, I will leave it there. You guys have a great week. Thank you, and God bless. We'll see you then.